Might be that light back there. Like both of the lights, actually. All right. Okay. So as long as these lights hold up, let me just kind of fix that up for a second because there we go. That's a little bit better. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about the Friday the 13th, the Goddess Path, and lucky or unlucky, and a lot of different breakdowns of those kinds of things. You can always drop questions in the chat as we're talking. And if you want to check out any of our offerings and stuff like that, check the link tree down in the description there. But for starters, it's Friday the 13th, which is why we were talking about it today. And we decided to hop on to do this live stream tonight. So if you're catching it later, feel free to drop any stuff in the comments. And of course, we can get back to you or email me. Once again, link down there. But Friday the 13th, why did people consider it unlucky? And one of the things that it attributes itself to with urban legends and stuff like that is back in 1307 with the Knights Templar. Now, the Knights Templar was a religious organization, a military religious organization that actually helped people go into the Holy Land, or Jerusalem, Palestine, whatever you want to call it. And they were the first people to create loans, and they had a ton of money. And there is the King of France, I believe, was the one that he racked up a lot of debt going to war, and he did not want to pay that debt back to the Knights Templar because they were the first creators of credit. So you think of credit cards and stuff, they actually invented that. And the king was like, I don't want to pay this back. I don't have that kind of money. So I'm going to say that they are devil worshippers, and then they are going to get killed. And he actually even got the Pope in on it. And then the Knights Templar were rounded up. Even the Grand Master was also rounded up, and tons and tons and tons, not all of them, but tons of them were murdered on Friday the 13th in 1307. And then, all right, what are the other ones with the 13 that we can think of?
Well, the thing is that we have to look at is that what's more important than the historical records is what is surrounding the energy of Friday the 13th. Okay. So when we think of the word Friday the 13th, that comes to mind evil. That comes to mind to devil worshiping. That comes to mind all these different superstitions.
Think of all the things that are around today. There's the Friday the 13th. I think that's a movie, right? And just anytime that you think Friday the 13th, it just puts this unsettlingness in people, and even buildings that are made with elevators. If you look at the numbers in an elevator, a lot of times it'll go 10, 11, 12, 14.
Because of the fact that this number of Friday the 13th is considered evil. So we're going to hop in here and really get into the nitty gritty of why we want to understand about Friday the 13th. And more than just the history is this energy that has been cascaded of it being witchcraft, evil, demonic, devil worshiping, and even the energies of when we think about the black cat, being evil, being considered the ally of the witch, and even with the witch hunts, right? So we have all this energy around Friday the 13th so that it is used as a way to weaponize against the sacred. Friday the 13th, when you really look at it beyond just the historical records, is that this was an energy and a personification of the energy of the divine feminine, because 13 was the energy and the emanation of the divine feminine. When we look at the feminine cycle of nature, of the lunar moon, which is connected to the goddess, that energy of 13 is the nature of the moon cycles that goes through our yearly cycle, 13 moons per cycle. Now, nowadays, we're in the Gregorian calendar, and we even have, in some parts of the world, like where we are, daylight savings, and our New Year's is even celebrated in the middle of the winter when it is time to go inward.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So our societies, modern societies, Western culture does not live in harmony with the cycles of Mother Earth, the seasons of the year, the seasons of Mother Nature, the seasons of the moon. And the energy, even more so important about this energy of the 13 is that it really has to do with the energy of the lunar wisdom, the energy of the divine feminine. Now, of course, granted, all of us can connect to the energy of the divine feminine. Naturally, those that do have cycles and that they are bleeding monthly, those people will connect to that energy more because they are in that circadian rhythm of the lunar cycles. Because the menstrual cycle of a female or somebody that is in menstruation in that time of their life, that person will be going through that cycle every single month, which roughly falls the 28-day lunar cycle of the moon. Now, interestingly enough, our society is actually run off of a male-based, testosterone-based level because the testosterone starts at the beginning of the day, just like the sun, and it peaks up, and then it dips down as it goes back down. Now, the lunar cycle is going through an entire wave, crusting and waving through, going up to the full moon, back to the new moon, right? And even we look at the tides in the ocean. So even if somebody were to say, for instance, not have a womb, or somebody might not be in a time of menstruation in their life, even some people have hysterectomies, or they have operations, or they just, even men like Nick, he doesn't have a womb. We can still connect the energy of this lunar cycle. And so what we're getting at is that when we have these energies that create this demonization and this attack towards the feminine through things like Friday the 13th, through things like Black Cats Are Evil, through things like our culture and the personas that are created against what we see represented as witchcraft or evil, right?
So let's connect a couple of dots here.
Yeah.
You have Friday the 13th, 1307. The Templars were accused of doing a lot of things with demons and basically magic and whatnot, and then they were killed for it. Then later on, when you had the witch trials and the Malleus Maleficarum and different persecution against those more nature-based traditions, the main victim of that was
females,
women. So now we've tied it from the 13 over to the women. Then you just talked about the lunar cycles and stuff, where those match up with the feminine, with the menstrual cycle, and then we can even tie that into the natural cycle of the seasons. Like you said, with the Gregorian calendar, we go off of, we start the year off in the middle of winter, which makes no sense, right? Where back in the days of Mesopotamia, the year would start in the spring, right? With the Akitu festival, with the divine union of the god and the goddess, portrayed by a union of the king and the priestess. And then what would that do? That would birth nature with plentiful crops and things like that. So there's not only the rhythm of every month that we can fall into as magical practitioners with working with the moon. Like if you want to do something for abundance and growing something, you do it for the waxing moon. If you want to bring something downwards or eliminate it, you can do it during the waning moon. If you want something to be at its fullest, you do it during a full moon. And in my tradition anyways, you don't do anything during a new moon because the moon is dark.
Now, interestingly enough, something about that is that there was a lot of this dynamic about, for instance, for myself, being a part of communities with Indigenous elders and being a part of the Lakota Lodge. We'd go in there to go through our sweat and go into the healing circle. And it used to be this thing about women, if they were bleeding, to not go into this beautiful room, this beautiful container to go in there. And a lot of times that could be thought of as a time of, oh, there's something wrong with our time of the month when we're bleeding. But in truth, that is a time of great power. And so there's even this energy of the new moon being this place of, the fertile void and being able to connect to the energy to plant those seeds during time. So the thing is that we're getting at is that we wanted to just be able to share a little bit about this, about the Friday the 13th and all of these dynamics that are happening.
And this all these things that tie in.
Yeah, that tie in about trying to create this corruption or this distorted view towards these ancient pathways, right? So whether they're shamanic pathways, whether they are wise woman traditions, whether they are the herbalist ways, whether they are magic, these are all what we want to go into is that they are all part of the goddess traditions.
Mm-hmm.
This is where it all comes from. So when we look at like the idea of witch hunts, we didn't even have the word witch hunts. Like we didn't even have that in our understanding because that was a created fabrication to attack any of those that were in their power, not only magically, but those that were herbalists and doulas and midwives, those that were work hunters, those that were wise women and wise men, spiritual leaders, as well as just anybody that took a stand against the church or against the culture and the times to say, you are a witch. We need to burn you. We need to kill you. Why? Because they are going against the grain of society. And so even that goes back to the stigma around Friday the 13th. So we can understand that we can take this opportunity to reclaim our power around this time of Friday the 13th and say, wow, this is a powerful time to remember that magic that is all around us and within us. And then ultimately leading us back to what we really want to talk about, which is going into the goddess path. So I want to talk now about the goddess path and about this power that is available within magic and within shamanism and within healing that is available to us within the goddess path.
So at the very beginning of spirituality, as far as we can tell, with the Venus figurines, just go ahead and Google it if you've never seen one. This is before writing ever happened. The first depiction of any kind of divinity or any kind of idol was a motherly figure, a woman that had a full chest and a big belly. And then when you get into writing systems with the very first writer in recorded history, the priestess in Mesopotamia, Hedwana. I don't know why my brain just skipped on that, but her stories were of the goddess Inanna, which was mainly worshipped or most prominently worshipped in the city of Ur in Mesopotamia. And she was worshipped as the main goddess alongside the sky god An or Anu. And basically, she was associated with the cycles of the seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pick it up.
And the other thing is that's really important here is understand going back to the Friday the 13th and this energy that is connected to Venus, right?
Oh, yeah.
This Venus is actually part of the lineage of Inanna that goes all the way back. So these different iterations have happened of the Inanna from all the way from Mesopotamia through time and space. And what we're showing is that there's this correlation that is very powerful to understand that in the beginning, we have the very, very first ever poet was Hedwana, and she was also a priestess. And these are the first written historical writings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were from this priestess.
Yep, the oldest ones in history that we actually have an attributed author for was her. And one of the things that I know that we were talking about was, okay, we're talking about Friday the 13th might be seen as unlucky. Well, we unpacked the number 13, but Friday,
Yep.
Right? Friday, the name Friday or the word Friday comes as an association with Frigga, who is a goddess. Now, if you do a delineation of the goddesses all the way back, you start to see their similarities. And given that we talked about the very first goddess in written history, Inanna, you can see the similarities in her evolution from Inanna all the way up to these different goddesses that were worshipped much later. So Friday is associated with Venus. You might hear that all the time because Venus is so big. That's why we named a planet after her, right?
Then we have Isis, which is Aset when Egypt's actually Kemet. But Isis slash Aset, right? So we have that.
That too.
Then we have Ashura, who was the wife of Yahweh. And we actually had the Ashura temples.
The Asherah poles and the Asherah groves.
They were worshiping the goddess Ashura.
And then those were nuked by the Deuteronomists that are during the Second Temple period in ancient Judea.
And we continue to go back, and we have Astarte. We have let's see, Ishtar, Inanna. So, and there's many more as well. But we just show that there is this energy that's life force of the goddess, right? That comes through time and space. And granted, I will say there are always going to be different, pagan traditions. With different cultures all over the world, they're going to have the goddesses. So we definitely, respect and honor that there are different magical systems and worshiping where some people might be very specific. They might be very specific to, doing Italian witchcraft. Strega. And they might be specifically just working with those goddesses. So, we're not taking away, but we're just showing that there is this energy that goes through time and space for a very, very long time, all the way back to the first goddess Inanna, and the first writings being from a priestess of Inanna. So the most cherished writings of that time of Mesopotamia, the most ancient culture in the world that they have, are from a priestess, which shows how powerful it is.
If you want to dig into some of those, Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Earth, from Diane Volkstein and Samuel Noah Kramer. I actually had this in my old college library, and I got tired of taking it out, so I bought it. And
yeah, we're always looking at that aspect of really finding the historical, gems and jewels, because nowadays there's so much information that can be a lot of beautiful interpretations.
I was going to say it could be interpreted.
Yes, we want to find those gems that are hidden within history. That's his job. He's really great at that. Me, I'm a channel. I'm an oracle. So we combine that intuition and that logic to work together.
So if we keep talking about the goddess stuff, along with the fact that way back in the day, as far as evidence goes, goddess worship was first, because the earth was seen as the life giver, right? Because it gave us the food, it gave us the plants, it gave us all the stuff that we could hunt and eat, or the things that we could grow and eat. And then the rains fertilized it, and then as above so below, like mirrors like, you have the fertilization of the earth from the rain bringing the plants. And then that's how they kind of started to see divinity as well. And working with nature around it, you can kind of get the idea that the very first magical systems of work not only worshiping divinity, but also working with it, because I'd like to say that like religion and spirituality is like worshiping something, but then magic is more working with it, as like a loose definition that I'm kind of just cooking up here, and then as it continues, you start to see like the way that spirituality is spun to have more of the male centered stuff on the top rather than having the feminine at the top. But everything comes from the feminine. Every one of us wouldn't be here if we weren't birthed first. You know what I mean? So the feminine is such a strong force that even as a guy, I kind of have to relent to the idea, or give way to the idea, that the feminine is a very, very powerful force to work with. And even in my own travels and studies with magic, if you ever watch my experiences with magic videos, part 1 and part 2, when my very first ritual that I ended up doing was a dedication to the goddess, and that was back in 2007, I think, summer of 2007. And then years later, when I started working with the Simon Necronomicon, because I had gone through 50 other something books, and I, really gravitated to it because it was the oldest system thing I could find, because it's not H.P. Lovecraft stuff, it's Mesopotamian stuff. I have a video debunking all that jazz, so go there if you disagree with me.
Or you want to check it out.
Or you want to know all the history and jazz behind it. Sure. And when I started to work with the book, it does focus on Marduk a lot, because he was the patron deity of Babylon. But it does also talk about Inanna. And then when you start to really dig into it and you go into the gate walking system, you start to understand that the gate walking is the biggest part in that book, right? Well, Marta didn't do the gate walking. Inanna did. So the initiatory system in that, the thing that actually transforms the heck out of you, is walking in the path of the most ancient goddess in unwritten record. So it shows that there's a huge transformative energy around working with the feminine. And even in the stories about Inanna, she was the first deity in written history to do a death and rebirth, which, you know, you can look at all the similarities and stuff to certain traditions and whatnot. Nowadays, you have dead for 3 days, resurrected. There is a food of life and water of life vis-a-vis bread and wine, you know, because that comes much later. And I think you guys know what I'm talking about. And then not only, you know, a lot of times when you hear about Inanna's descent, you know, she goes down there, she gets killed, she gets hung on a stake for 3 days, she gets raised from the dead because Enki helps her out, and then she comes back and it's like, okay, that story's over. Wrong. That's only the first part of it. The second part of it is when Inanna's descent is when she comes back and the spirits are following her, saying, "Hey, you left the space. There was a mark on you from the underworld. You cannot leave without someone replacing you." So the spirits follow her around, and they're like, "How about your handmaiden?" She says, "No." "How about your son?" She says, "No." She goes back to her home city and she sees her husband drunk on the throne having a party, who didn't mourn her, who didn't care, was dressed up to the nines rather than sitting in a rag and mourning, which I guess is what you're supposed to do. And she's like, "Hey, pick that guy." And he ends up going in. The spirits go after him. He runs away. He eventually relents and he ends up going down into the underworld. Then his little sister goes to Inanna and says, "Hey, I want my brother back. I'm really, really sad about it." Da, 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 da. So she makes an agreement where Dumuzi, her husband's sister, Geshtinana, will go down in the underworld for 6 months, so Dumuzi can come up for 6 months, and then they can see each other on the way in and when they trade places. You know this, and if you're saying, "Well, that sounds a lot like Demeter and Persephone," that's where they got it from. But now, that going down to the underworld and then coming back up for the male in that story was first done by the female Inanna, and then she initiated him into this death and rebirth cycle. And then that story is made to explain the seasons, where in the winter months, when, you know, stuff ain't happening and it's all cold and everything's dying, that's when Dumuzi is in the underworld. And then the 6 months when he is up here is when you have, you know, all the vegetation sprouting and the leaves and the trees growing leaves and all this other stuff. It's because they're back together and they are in union, thus creating things. But the more important thing here is the female initiating the male.
Yes, and that the goddess goes first and that it is the god. Then we look at these later traditions that follow this path of Inanna. We have different traditions. We'll focus on some of the ones that mainly people have heard of, like, for instance, the Eleusinian mysteries.
Eleusinian, yeah.
Yeah, Eleusinian mysteries.
Such a hard word.
I know. With Demeter and Persephone. And so we have the same cycle of the mother, instead in this case, is mourning her daughter because she has been taken into the underworld. But then she becomes this queen of the underworld. She is able to come back to the middle world, but somebody needs to replace her. And so it's this switch off where, you know, there is a period of time where we are going to have the mourning of Demeter crying over, you know, her beloved daughter, you know, being in the underworld and then being resurrected again. And then the spring comes back. And so this is cycles of nature, and it follows these initiation mysteries where people, you know, thousands of people would gather from very far away to go through these powerful death rite initiations so that they could transform themselves, so they could alchemicalize themselves through a very feminine based tradition. And then what happened is a slight detouring happened with the Dionysus mysteries, and it became much more male-centered. And a lot of that had to do with orgies. I don't know if that's where we can see on YouTube. Oopsies, bleeped it out. But there was a lot of that, fun times, big parties, and drinking, and him wanting to have all these women run around after him. And I really do. We cannot say for the truth of what's the reality here, but we can look at it and say that it was much more of a male dominance, about this male being worshipped, that he was supreme. That really shows a difference between these very feminine based traditions and the masculine based traditions. And actually the only book that was ever written, or the only thing that we ever have any clues to about let me see if I can say this. Say
the Eleusinian?
Yes, you said it, not me.
The Eleusinian mysteries.
Yes. The only book that was ever written was actually a book. I don't know the original name of it, but it's actually referred to in English as The Golden Ass. And,
right.
So there was this man that goes on this whole journey where he becomes turned into a donkey. And he has to go through this whole journey to, basically be ridiculed and have to overcome all these challenges. And then eventually, he is able to finally be transformed back in the man and go through and, and come before, Isis, and there's that reference to that. And so again, even the Eleusinian mysteries, hey, I said it right. I think.
Nice.
Woohoo!
10 points for Gryffindor.
There's that connection again to Isis or Aset and Osiris in the story of the resurrection of Osiris, and the story, if you want to share about with Set, with his brother Osiris.
So, Set and Osiris. So we're talking another resurrection myth where Set and Osiris, like Set, he was the king of the underworld. He didn't really like his brother. I think he was a little bit jealous of him. So he ended up killing Osiris, tricking him into like hanging out.
The coffin. Oh, so there was a coffin. They were all at this big party. And
it's always about the parties.
And he wanted to see who could fit in this glorious tomb. And so
I bet you could fit in there. Give it a try.
He did. And he shoved him in there and basically sent him off to be killed. So, between him going through this whole journey, we're not going to get all into it today, but, whether he's going down the river, he gets turned into a tree, gets cut up into a whole bunch of pieces. His special item got thrown into the ocean.
And never to be seen again.
So she had to create a new one for him.
That was a good one.
And
that was a
I
good
don't
one.
Think about what happened to us, like the fishes.
So basically, So he got tricked, he got murdered, and he got chopped up into a bunch of pieces. And then his wife had to go searching for all the pieces. She didn't find all of the pieces, but she was able to resurrect 9/10 of them. And so what do we have there? Not only is it a dying and rising god, and also he becomes the god of the underworld. So Osiris ends up becoming, is it Osiris, right? I always get Osiris and Horus mixed up. Yep. So Osiris becomes the god of the underworld. So screw you, Set, you're demoted, you're out. So he gets resurrected. He becomes the king of the underworld. But he didn't just start off doing this on his own. He's like, oh, I think this is going to be fun. The fact that his wife helped him through all that stuff, he would not have resurrected without her. So he wouldn't have earned the title of king of the underworld or ruler of the underworld, whatever's the title you want to use, without her help. So it shows another interplay of how the feminine is so crucial in helping the masculine to grow spiritually or attain another level. Like behind every great magical YouTuber is someone rolling her eyes. You know what I mean? But anyways,
and
go on.
Helping out with what's going to be birthed next. And so so the thing is that we still honor that no matter what gender you are, that you are able to connect to the goddess. And that's the big thing too. We want to really emphasize is that the thing is that everybody can connect to the goddess. It's just more of the ones that were guiding the way. We want to emphasize this were actually the priestesses.
Mm-hmm.
And even across time and space through many different cultures, that were pagan worshiping cultures, there was this concept of the king being chosen by the land, being chosen by the goddess, and showing his worthiness to be able to rule over the land. And all these stories about the heroes gamers, which we'll get more into because we want to go super crazy into it today. But there is this beauty of the male and the female coming together, or two people that are, in their feminine and the masculine coming together to work together.
It's the union of the energies.
Exactly.
That creates something new.
That divine couple energy, right? So, even beyond, of course, we can also do that within ourselves, to connecting to the inner divine feminine, the inner divine masculine, and creating that union within ourselves. We can also create it together. And really, ultimately, what we're getting at here is that we want to share that the Friday the 13th, we wanted to kind of make that plug way. It's like almost like the clickbait, but in a good way. Like, ooh, Friday the 13th. But really, what we want to talk about is the goddess. And the thing is
it's
that
a segue.
It's a segue. And so, the big thing that we want to share here is that there is so much available to us. We could get into so many different aspects of this. But ultimately, what we're saying here is that really magic is not possible. All the magic that you do, or you're exploring, or that you are checking out, whether it's books, podcasts, joining whatever different communities that you're joining, the thing is, any of this magic, any of the shamanism, any of herbalism, any of priestess and priest work, all of this all goes back to the goddess. And so there is that aspect of the gods are a part of, of magic. But what we're saying is that the goddess has been left out, and the emphasis on how important the goddess is has been left out. Why? Because the church saw this power. The church saw this power. First started in Rome. Of course, it became more of a male-dominant society, and that's where you see these goddesses disrespecting the women. But you also see it in India too, where they had their most ancient goddesses, where they're so powerful and they're so primal, and then turning them.
And then they got subjugated under male power. Even way back with the Second Temple period, you had Asherah and Yahweh being worshipped together, and then when they went to go in there and redo the temple, they discovered a text that had all the good rules in it. And that's when they started nuking the Asherah poles and the gardens and stuff. And it became like a crime punishable by death to actually work with the divine feminine anymore. So first you had them simpatico, where the god and the goddess were worshipped alongside each other, and the polarity was respected with the way that they balanced each other out. But then it started to go from like, hey, these two forces being equal, to one being higher than the other, or one being dropped out completely.
Which is what they tried to do, was destroying the goddess, destroying these magical paths with the witch hunts, with the crusades, with trying to destroy herbalism, was destroying all these traditions, all these ancient texts. Why?
Because even with the way of, so the term pagan, right? Pagan just generally meant someone that lived like out in the city limits. Why? Because they would live more with the cycles of the land, having to do farming and whatnot. So if you're working with the cycles of the moon, and you're working with the cycles of the seasons, you're working with that feminine energy, right? And you're more in touch with nature. So you're more likely to be arguably goddess centered. And that went completely against the idea of the male dominated like city state, where the guys were in charge of everything. So in the cities, you had guys that were in charge, looking at the ones out there that saw the feminine as good and working with nature as good. And they're like, we don't want that. So then there became a division between, I'm good because I live in the city, and oh, hey, what's in the city? Because everybody grew up and built all their stuff around a church.
Yep.
And those that lived super far away from it, less influenced by the church, more influenced by nature, working with the goddess. We don't like that, right?
So that's that aspect of slowly this destruction and trying to literally cut us off from the goddess, from the divine mother, from Mother Earth. I mean, if we even look at it, indigenous societies all over the world and their traditions, with shamanism and these spiritual paths, with these people so deeply connected to the earth, very much connected to the goddess. And they respect the earth. They respect each other. They don't have war. They are not destroying their planet. They are not destroying people. They are not destroying the resources. They live in the egalitarian society because there is this
They live in
honor
harmony with the land.
of
Like,
the
you know,
mother.
they never waste anything, you know, because they know that what they walk on and what they work with and everything that they use is a gift from the
Divine Mother.
the Divine Mother,
Yeah.
right?
And so
That's why you have Mother Earth and Father Sky.
Yep.
Well, I'm walking all over her all the time, and everything that comes out of the ground comes from her.
And so that's what we want to get at, is that there is this importance of us to remember that as we are exploring our beautiful pathways of magic and the occult and mysticism, is that we need to realize how important it is to restore the goddess and her wisdom. Not to say that she is going to supersede this idea of God, which of course many people might not have a good association with God, but just saying that we're not trying to remove the masculine.
And we're not
energy.
saying like one should be above the other, arguably, but you know, they need to each have their station and be respected for the energies that they give.
And if we look at
the
our
yin yang,
society, yeah, and if we
you
look
know?
at our society, it has that energy of that oppressive force, which I would say is more than just patriarchy. I would say that it really comes back to the church. When we look at it at the end of the day, this all really stems from the church.
Because they're saying that there's a guy up there, and even his Trinity is all one. It's all male.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and so the thing is that we're getting at is that the aspect of the church really set its eyes on destroying the adversary, which was
The divine
anything.
feminine.
Yeah, it was anything against it that had to do with the divine feminine, that had to do with the goddess. Even the word Satan, one of the meanings for Satan is actually adversary.
Mhm.
So if you
Hasatan.
are following Satan and you are worshiping the goddess, if you are connecting to magic, if you are connecting to tarot, if you are connecting to wanting to be psychic or connecting to the spirits or shamanism, any of that, right? You are Satan. You are the adversary of the church, right? So all this goes back. And seriously, when I saw that, I was like, shoot, okay, Satan, one of the definitions is adversary of the church. Well, that makes a lot of sense, right? So what we're saying is that we want to be able to just share with you this power that the goddess has available for us, and a little bit just about Friday the 13th, that kind of segue, into the goddess tradition, and really ultimately, so I don't know what time it is, but we're doing pretty decent time. We'll probably open up for questions if anyone pops in, they want to ask me questions. But yeah, so we'll keep an eye out if you have any other questions. But we want to segue with this now is to our pathways. So we'll just kind of briefly share upon this, but I know Nick, shared a little bit, in some of his other videos about, your first ceremony you did with your first girlfriend that you had in college, not first girlfriend, but, the first girlfriend in college, how she introduced you to magic, and you guys did a ceremony specifically with the goddess, and how it led you.
Still picture it.
Yeah. And it led you ultimately to the Sumerian, Mesopotamian magic and mystical pathways, which ended up being the gate walking with the goddess Inanna. And then ultimately, this is where it goes into my pathway. So my pathway, I've been very blessed to grow up, being part Roma, and which most people will know as Gypsy. But I came from women that were very connected to their psychic abilities, to prophetic dreams, to being oracles, to having healing gifts, to being very, very intuitive women. And of course, like many, along the pathways over, last over 1,000 years, we've had so much of the persecution towards women and their magical gifts, as well as a lot of attack. Actually, even if people say like gypsies, that's really cool. Well, gypsies were genocided, they were enslaved, they were hunted down to try to literally kill them and wipe them out because they were a threat, especially because they were travelers, they were nomadics, and so they didn't abide by the rules of different kingdoms because they could travel because of that.
Hey, we don't like here, we can leave.
We don't want that because we can't control you. And they were also, again, connected to that energy of the goddess, the feminine, the Shakti, the Mother Earth, living in tune with the seasons and cycles. And so they were attacked. So a lot of actually our, ideas of things with palmistry and oracle readings and even tarot cards were invented by the Roma or Romani, the Gypsies. Believe it or not, they say it was actually, I think they said it was Italy. But when you actually look into the research, the Roma people were actually the ones that were using the printing presses to print up the ancient religious texts, including the Bibles, at a certain period, which I'm not as good with the facts, but they also printed the tarot cards for the tarot readings. And so they were the original creators of that, and palmistry and all that tea leaf reading, everything like that. And again, I was blessed because my mom had those gifts, but she was shamed for those gifts. And then I was the first in my line that was given permission to explore those gifts and explore that pathway. And so I started at a very early age, being very psychic, very gifted intuitively, and prophetic dreams. And I was able to join a circle of other magical people, and to go to the Sabbats and be in tune with the lunar cycles, with the moon, with the cycles, the Sabbats of the year, and celebrate at a very early age, as well as studying with indigenous elders on the shamanic path as well. And so I've been on this path for a really long time. And I think what's the most beautiful thing is that as I went deeper into my path, specifically with the goddess, going even deeper than just my path with Mother Earth, is that eventually through my own pathway of going through my own initiations with the goddess and evolution of becoming a priestess, and really going through my own death and rebirth with the goddess, eventually what happened is it went into our own relationship and ended up bringing him into the underworld. So first it was me going in the underworld, and then I took him into the underworld. And ultimately, it really wasn't even me doing it. It was the goddess herself. It took us a long time to really understand that. That's a story for another day.
I mean,
that could take all night. So
one of the
be
biggest
prepared for some good tea, a nice little fire.
One of the biggest morals that from that is that, like, when you open that door, when you're working with different forces and divinity and like a path or whatever, if you have a certain deity or a certain system that you're working in, they can kind of be working behind the scenes or pushing you in certain directions that you might not be aware of it until later, where it finally hits you. Like me, I've been working like on behalf of the goddess like this whole time, but it didn't click. Like, remember I picked the book up 12 years ago.
Yep.
I picked the Simon Necronomicon and dug into all Mesopotamian stuff 12 years ago, probably this month, actually. Now that I think about it. And all the stuff fell into place. Like,
if it was only 13, then it could make it more fun.
Only we should have done this next month.
Mastery.
Or we should have done it next year.
I know. We'll wait till next year. 13 will be the anniversary.
Basically, the fact is that, like, she's been working this whole time with me, whether I hadn't acknowledged it or not. And it's just kind of mind blowing. So I know, like, Karos, who's here, he works primarily with Ereshkigal, which is another great goddess. I mean, so, like, think for yourself, how has she been working with you longer than you've been working with her? And think of how the divine feminine in your lives, for anyone who's watching this, might be playing a role, or what kind of things are going on in your life that might be that energy, that vibe, that current trying to show you
or opening up to you. And sometimes it can come in seasons. Sometimes it can come as little moments. So,
or a cosmic 2x4
or cosmic 2x4. That's listen. But that also comes, I think, personally for us, is that when we're called to that path, and the spirit or the goddess or God or whatever it may be is saying, okay, this is your pathway, they might get louder, especially if you're called to go deeper and even share that path. And so I think for us, the reason why this path had to be so intense for us, just the same way as my medicine path, been many years, and healing myself and transforming myself and turning my pain into power. I had to go through that death and rebirth cycle to become a medicine person, or as people know, as a shaman, as an initiated shaman. I know some people might have issues with that terminology. Unfortunately, that is what people know.
That's the term.
So I realized, instead of trying to redefine it. I just say medicine person slash shaman, but there's more of, for me, going to the traditional pathway, which again is initiation, which is the way that our ancestors did it, is they were initiating these pathways by the elders that held this wisdom. And ultimately, that pathway was deep in that, and even going through literally dying and being reborn, and and then like actually like near death experiences that I went through in my life, two of them earlier and then later on, which actually was connected with the goddess. So the thing is that the same thing with the goddess, again, I ended up going and being descended into the underworld, and so when I look back at it, though, there were so many things that, like, it took a while for me to really understand. So for instance, I actually been drawing the Star of Inanna and painting it, and I have a painting upstairs, and in just different symbology, and and things that were connected to Inanna that I didn't even know, like, she was there. So sometimes these things might be calling to you. So maybe it's something with an oracle deck or something that you see online that's really drawing you in.
Or whatever kind of system that you might be called to. Like I've always gravitated back to the Mesopotamian stuff, no matter what else I looked at, or a certain pantheon you might be drawn to, or even certain symbols that you might be drawn to. Dig into those things, certain energies that you might feel from time to time. What are those? Not to Willem Dafoe this, but what is the symbolism? What's the deeper thing? So whatever you got going on, try to dig deeper. You might think what you're vibing and what you're feeling and where your path is taking you, but really examine that and see if you can go on a level deeper.
And that's that opportunity, right? So that we can just notice that even things that, like, maybe right now you don't see it, but like even like looking back at the last few years, or things that have in your life that maybe you feel this connection to, whether it's a movie or a book or certain experiences that really made you feel like, wow, that was a very special moment that really drew me in, right? Like his experience with, your first relationship that you had in college, right? It's like he goes back on it, right? And you're like, what's your feelings about that? Like, not that epiphany about that connection with the goddess being there.
I mean, that was absolutely huge, because it was like the compass just pointing in the right direction. Because I've always felt like I was like a spiritual seeker trying to dig at something, but that also meant, I felt like I was trying to find something this whole time, but the very first experience that I had was that thing I was looking for.
And so that
sometimes on the journey, it's like the hero's journey, which I did want to mention, by the way, the whole hero's journey continuum, or the cycle, where you start off in in your normal life, and then other things happen, you go on a journey. One of the things that Joseph Campbell, who created this whole diagram, one of the things on it is meeting with the goddess, isn't it?
Yep.
Right? It's called, that section is literally called meeting with the goddess. But what I was trying to say was, so I started off with that first ritual with the dedication of the goddess, and then I started digging through all these books, and I bought 50 books, and then I did rituals all the time, and blah, 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 blah. And then I started working with the Mesopotamian magic and the Simon Necronomicon, and then I'm back at the beginning, right where I started, with the thing working with the goddess.
Yep.
Stuff really is cycles. Oh, like, you mean like we started off with talking with the moon and the cycles of the seasons. So I think we just actually even just made a cycle out of this whole thing.
And so, we just invite you to just,
That's funny.
Be open to exploring, how your practices can evolve and bloom and grow and explore new edges and new opportunities and new uncharted territories that might be available for you if you don't already work with a goddess, and of course, there's so many different goddesses that you can work with. For us, we're really orienting on, what the goddess has available for us. And, specifically, we'll get into it in a moment what that is. But, for yourself, just being open-minded to how that energy of working with the goddess or working with the divine feminine could really open up your pathway. And then specifically for us, what we kind of want to come to that completion, in sharing this is the reason also why we wanted to hop on today as well, is that, Friday the 13th, really, it is that energy of trying to suppress the divine feminine, to suppress the goddess,
the hidden stuff too,
the hidden mysteries, the feminine mysteries. And, and I feel like sometimes it's really important to just really be deeply in your path and really take time to digest everything and really sit with it all, going through these deep transformations on death and rebirth, not only of myself, not only of Nick and his journey after I went through my goddess ascent, him going through the goddess ascent, and both of us, our relationship literally destructing, going into death,
dying, and then being reborn,
and resurrecting, and all thanks to powerfully giving ourselves over to the goddess, and through the initiations with the goddess and the mystery traditions and with Mother Earth, it's kind of this beautiful weaving of the shamanic pathways and the magical pathways and the goddess path, and really taking time to allow all of this to integrate for us both. And we actually, I've been writing for a long time, something that's just been continuing to come to me to write, inspired by the goddess and Mother Earth and my guides, being an oracle and a channel. So over the years, I've had a lot of stuff that I've written. And over this last few years, it became very clear, going through this journey and receiving all those revelations and these beautiful gospels, from the divine feminine, from the goddess, being able to finally put this into a book. So we started working on that early this year, but we had a lot of really important work we had to do for the planet and ceremonies. And then he ended up going even deeper with the goddess this year, going through some really powerful initiations in nature with the elders, and going on deeper initiations of the goddess and the cave initiations, and
working
really
working a lot with the Nustas.
Yep, working with the Nustas, the feminine nature spirits. So we were like, okay, we're starting to write this book. Goddess is like, time to go. And then we had to pause it all because we needed to go even deeper. And wow, we didn't even know we'd be even more transformed.
And luckily it got cold, so we could kind of slow down a little.
Exactly. So we can go inward, because we had been going so many different places, doing so much important, intense work with Mother Earth and these beautiful feminine water spirits, and going through these initiations and really diving in with working with the caves and the goddess and the dark womb of the cosmic mother, and it was a lot to take to take that time to navigate all that, and then allow some integration to happen from all this beautiful medicine we've received this year. And so we're finally excited to be again working on this beautiful book that we are going to be wanting to get it out to a good publisher, and actually one of my mentors is connected to the publisher, so fingers crossed on that. I really have a good feeling about that, about getting that magical lunar magic happening with sharing this book into the world. But even more important, the book that will be a process of us being able to birth that, through the womb of the goddess, and create that, which is beautiful because again, we've gone through our own journeys of death and rebirth, as well as us, and then coming together, divine feminine, divine masculine, coming together as a conscious couple, priest and priestess, to really step into this pathway. It's kind of crazy because, I had to shed away, not that I am not still on my shamanic path and share so much about my path, but I had to shed away layers of myself to make room for me to really claim and step into this pathway for me as a priestess, and really orienting to the shamanic medicine path as well as the goddess path. And so with Nick, same kind of thing of him being so deeply, woven into, the Magickology and talking about Magickology and the esoteric arts, and then being called
branching out into more of the shamanism stuff
and the goddess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So expanding.
Yep.
Yep.
And then ultimately, it's one of those things where, how can we say for myself or him on how this is going to evolve and change. But really, it's one of those tricky things when you're working with the goddess so much and you're surrendering to her, to be really a devotee and really be a vessel, to allow the work to come through. People will be like, oh, like I was divinely inspired, or maybe
it just came to me.
People are like religious and they're like, I feel like it was my God-given mission in the world to XYZ. Well, the goddess has our XYZ mission, and we have to trust in that process of how it's going to unfold and evolve. But really, ultimately, what we're getting at here, and it's very exciting, is that beyond the book, and already there's 2 books that are coming through. And I'm telling Nick, because I'm an oracle and I'm connected to the goddess, we got to wait for book 2 because the first one's really important.
Yep, we got to finish that up.
So what I want to say is that moving on from this, we're really excited to be able to share more with talks, not just about the shamanism, which of course I've been here a little bit here and there, but I had so much work I had to do. When you're initiating a medicine person, it's a lot of responsibility. But what we're going to be doing is talking more about the goddess, more about the feminine path, more about the connections that we can make, as well as teaching classes and courses. And ultimately, the vision is, from the goddess, is to bring people through the beautiful pathway of the goddess of death and rebirth. So being able to heal and transform ourselves and our past and our identities, and be able to be reborn and be empowered by the goddess,
the initiations and such.
Yeah, to be able to really come into a deeper power, which in our society we have lost connection with initiations. We have lost connection with the most powerful, which is the descent and ascent, the death and rebirth.
Yep.
The hero's journey. We only see it because he has to go out into the world, because it's through a story arc, where he's going out in the world to face those battles, right? But in the heroine's journey, the goddess journey, it is the inward journey. So we're going inward into that pathway through the magical, through the shamanic, through the spiritual,
shadow work and such. Yeah,
exactly. And going inward to transform and alchemize ourselves, so we can become very powerful, and we can be imbued with that power of the god and the goddess.
Because if you think about the whole descent, it's going in the earth. But when it comes to like spiritually, when we're mirroring that kind of thing, I'm not diving into a hole, in the ground. I'm going inward.
Yes, into the subconscious, into the body, into the earth.
Because as above, so below, as within, so without.
Yeah. So we're excited about that. And if any of you are curious about that, I do work with people one-on-one, in that pathway, not only of shamanic healing and transformation through ritual and ceremony and initiation work, but also with the goddess, and really doing those deep layers of healing work to transform, and going through that beautiful process of working with the goddess. But also, we're going to be sharing more soon with that with you all, and kind of weaving more of this beautiful medicine that the goddess has
energy. Yes.
Exactly. So
and
yeah,
I'm gonna make one more shameless plug. So I made a post on it recently. I know we were talking about the goddess books and stuff. My latest fantasy novel is almost complete with the final draft. I just have to proofread, I think, like 4 more chapters. So keep an eye out for that, because I am going to be putting it up as a pre-order. I'm going to make a channel announcement. You're also going to be able to find it on my Facebook group, and I'm probably going to make a page for it on my website. But that is going to be very. You haven't read the ending yet, because we're getting there.
I know we're getting there,
because she's helping me proofread it.
And he's reading it too.
So exciting. Good. Yeah, she gets the audiobook version. But anyways, I'm really, really, really excited about that, because I'm super proud of this book. I actually just made a video on it today that dropped earlier. If you wanted more of an update on it, but it's going to be good. So I just wanted to have my little shameless plug in there. But so I think we'll leave it at this.
Yeah.
And
if you have any questions, leave them below in the comments. You can also email us. And if you're interested in working with either one of us, with him, Magic, and he also does shamanic healing, or me with working with the goddess or shamanic healing, or even learning how to be a shamanic healer and work with these pathways, then feel free to reach out and email us.
Yep. All right. So we will catch you guys next time. We're going to try to hopefully do these live streams on more of a regular basis, but we're still trying to work the kinks out on when to do that.
Yes.
And
I hope that you all have a blessed Friday the 13th and a happy full moon coming up. So, we just got to be excited about this magic that's available to us and, just take advantage of this opportunity to see the ways that you can reflect on how you can connect more to the goddess or how you can weave it more in your life, or just be open to how cool it is that we have so much magic that comes from Mother Earth and these ancient esoteric traditions.
all right. So until next time, good hunting. Boop.